Welcome to Guitars and Music. I hope you'll consider subscribing. I hope you'll consider watching my original song Thursday series, which is also a playlist. Every Thursday at 3, I upload an original song with an accompanying video. I also uploaded a Robin Trower tribute last night. I'm going to redo it in a couple weeks. I'm going to listen to it. I just kind of played it off as a one-off, almost on purpose, I was listening to it today. I think I can do it better, and I'm going to do it better. Give me a couple weeks to gel. I wanted to talk a little bit today, these kind of Sunday chats I do, on click tracks. And I've always not really liked click tracks too much for recording purposes. I know they have their role, and I know that's probably an issue that some people will disagree with me on. So I just kind of wanted to give my take on a click track. I'm sure most of you know what a click track is, but it's like a metronome, basically, that plays, and while you record. I think they use them in live too. A lot of times drummers have them playing through their headphones. I tend to think they kill the feel of a song, and they also limit the ability of a song to develop. I think one of the things we're seeing with all these articles on the decline of rock, the decline of guitars, and EDM is a lot of music now doesn't have the dynamics and the tempo intensities of old analog music that was played more in a live way. So I do think click tracks are part of the overall story of how music has changed. I'm not going to say change is always for the worst or always for the better. Neither of those are true ever. They're always trade-offs. But I've never really liked click tracks, and I wanted to say a little bit about it. I've got my little whiteboard here. One thing, if you'll forgive me, I'm going to start with a PG-13 question, so you might want to have the kids leave the room. But let me ask you this. What human activity, when it feels really good, you go harder and faster? What human activity, of the different human activities that humans do, what human activity, when it feels really good to us, we go harder and faster? Well, get your mind out of the gutter, everybody, because the answer is rock and roll. I know what you were thinking, and maybe it's kind of similar. Actually, the answer is rock and roll. There's an intensity where you go harder and faster, and songs build. And I think a number of things about the move to so much influence of computers and Pro Tools and music has taken away that very basic human factor. When things feel good to us, we go harder and faster. Of course, we always want to be in control. I think that's where click tracks have had a role, is, sometimes music gets out of control. I want to give you another example. I want you to picture a theater at the end of a big, long musical or some sort of dramatic musical theater, and it's the grand finale, and the star comes out on the stage. The chorus is in the back. They're going to come out on the second or third verse for the chorus. This is going to be the grand finale leading into the curtain call, but it starts out with just the star on the stage. It's been a hell of a show, all kinds of drama, and now here's the grand finale, with the sort of resolution of whatever tension was going on, and the star comes on the stage. There's a spotlight, there's an orchestra in the pit, and there's just one lone spotlight on that star. We'll say she's a soprano. It's almost always a soprano, isn't it? It's never a guy, and it's never an alto. So the lead singer comes out, the great star of the show, and the spotlight's on her, and it's going to be the grand finale, and she's standing there alone in a darkened stage, ready for the great finale of the show. And she opens her mouth to start singing, and all of a sudden you have click, 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 click. This song goes at 64 BPM, and it just went right through. That would stink, wouldn't it? Because that song that we're envisioning is going to start kind of slow, almost like a whisper, almost just like a reflection. And then the second verse is going to build in intensity, probably volume dynamics too. And by the end, it's going to be, all the chorus on stage, the lights are on, the big, uplifting finale. And if you just had a click track, that would ruin that. Now, it would also ruin it if you lost control and started to rush. That would also ruin it. But part of musicianship is having control of tempo. But tempo is a part of music, just like dynamics. In classical music or any music, when it's written, you have dynamic markings. So, for example, louder and softer, forte, piano, fortissimo, pianissimo, fortissimo, pianissimo, crescendo. But you know what you also have? You have tempo markings in music too, because great music, tempo is a part of the dynamics of a song. So you might, you have retards or accelerandos, or you look at any classical music, is full of tempo fluctuations. I think the trick is to be in control of that. I do think sometimes when people talk about click tracks, they use a term that I'm not sure what it means, but they'll also often say it's the human factor. And I agree with that too. I mean, I agree that music can lose the human factor if it's too technical. So with Pro Tools, everything's gridded out, boom, boom, boom. They can just move stuff around like it was on some kind of a number line, with these Pro Tools, and it's really kind of amazing. But what people say, somewhat true, is that music like that loses the human factor. Now, I sometimes think when we use the term human factor, we're thinking, we're kind of using that as a euphemism for people make mistakes. So there are mistakes in it. So if you say, I love Led Zeppelin, they have the human factor, you might be saying, well, Jimmy Page was a little sloppy here and there, but it's great music. The excitement and the creativity of it is the important thing. And when we say human factor, sometimes we might mean there are imperfections, but I don't necessarily mean that, although I think that's part of it. I think the human factor is intensity. When you play louder, you play more intensely. That's why sometimes another thing they do with Pro Tools is, let's say they want the third verse to be louder than the second verse on some of this EDM, they might just turn it up. But if you take something that was played at the same intensity and then you turn it up, you're not changing the intensity, you're just making it louder. And intensity and volume are two different words. So when you play louder, by definition, you have to play with more intensity. It's the only way you can make an instrument resonate more. And that increased intensity, even if you're not changing the tempo, is a part of that human factor. And I don't really think a machine can do that if you're just turning up the volume, because intensity is a human factor, and turning up the volume doesn't really accomplish the same task. It's not even it's apples and oranges. It's not even the same thing. So, and I kind of think that about tempo. You would never want some nice ballad that builds in intensity to just have like a metronome playing. Can you imagine I played classical music for years. I should keep it up more, but I used to practice a lot with the metronome, but it builds discipline. A lot of guitar players practice with the metronome, but you would never want to play like that. You develop the good timing. Now I have heard on some of those old albums, I will say that I was raised on old albums. I'll hear music that has tempo problems, not just builds, but it actually has tempo problems. I was actually thinking of an old Johnny Winter album I used to like called Saints and Sinners, and a couple of the songs on there rush. They don't build an intensity in terms of tempo or dynamics. It's more like they rush. I feel like they were, maybe when I listen to it now, I feel like they were on a lot of, we'll say, caffeine. But you can hear it. That Stone County, there are a couple on there where it sounds like they're kind of rushed, maybe literally and figuratively. Too much caffeine in the studio, and you can hear it. It's out of control. Now that's bad, and I think that's one of the reasons people use click tracks. The other thing about click tracks is I think studio musicians liked him, because now, 50 years ago, going in a studio is a big deal, but since the recording technology revolution, everybody's got a studio. For several $1,000s, you can buy recording equipment that was probably as good as the stuff they recorded some of our favorite albums on. But that means everybody's got a studio, and we're always kind of playing on stuff. And but studio time is expensive. So when you go in there, you want a click track, and you might have studio musicians, and they like a click track, and they can just play to a chord chart and follow that click track, and then leave and take their money. Now, if you think about it, a band doesn't do that. A band that's rehearsed learns the tempo of a song with all its shadings, right along with the dynamics of a song. So, I have a song called Daphne. It's one of my original songs. It's based on the old TV show Dark Shadows, but that's probably I've written several songs that I've performed a fair amount, but that Daphne is probably the most successful song I've ever written, which isn't saying much, but anyway, I had a friend years ago. He passed away, unfortunately, in 2013, but we played that all over the city and in other places too. And we had a recording of it that was recorded live at Eddie's Attic in Atlanta. You can hear it, by the way. And we would play that, and we played it the same way every time. I mean, I think that recording was 4 minutes and 30 seconds, and we had memorized it like that because we had listened to it. So we would play that. We recorded it a couple times on like local radio stations and stuff, and I would hear it back, and it always came in at like 4 minutes 29 seconds, 4 minutes 28 seconds, because we had learned that tempo right along with the song. And that's what I think a lot of times studio musicians, when they're, even no matter how good they are, they're kind of following along and they like that click track. But when you really have a song kind of in your DNA and you've learned it, you don't need a click track. Just like cover songs, you don't need a click track to play Sweet Caroline. You might, if you're getting a little excited, you might want to have someone kind of slow you down so you don't get too carried away. But you don't, you mostly need click tracks, I feel like, on songs you don't know that well, which says something. So you have studio musicians, they can kind of follow along with the chord chart or whatever, and it's all kind of set up for the engineer and the studio musicians. There'd be no way you could play so many classic songs with the click track. I could think of so many examples, but one is that just comes to mind is like Midnight Rambler by the Rolling Stones. Slows way down, almost to nothing, and then speeds up, and it builds in that kind of harder, faster. It builds in intensity. And some of those songs, music, rock and roll music is almost like athletics. I say this as an aging man, but I used to enjoy sports sort of, and sometimes some of those rock and roll songs, it's an athletic endeavor. Think about Freebird. By the end of Freebird, they're playing as hard and as fast as they can, and that's part of the mystique of that song. It's just 110% by the end. And that's a really important, when they finish that song, they're playing as hard and as fast as they can, and that's part of the mayhem and the greatness of Freebird. And a lot of songs are like that. I notice sometimes on backing tracks, I'll be playing along to backing tracks, and they'll sound really good, but there'll be a 9 or 10 minute long backing track, and it never really builds in intensity. There might be like a B section where, a lot of those backing tracks, it'll have like an A and a B section. And, for the B section, it might kind of, the drum, it's probably a drum machine, but the drum will kind of change to going to the ride, like a live drummer. But they can't really build in intensity, and they also are at the same BPM. And so after a while, it's kind of mind-numbing. And I think, in the 80s when drum machines came out, the drum machines are basically a glorified form of click track. You do lose that human factor. I know there's... so I've never been too big on click tracks. I know they have a role, and I think in a lot of studios where they're running people in and out all day, they use click tracks kind of to move things along, because you know it, but if you really know a song, you feel it, you know, that melody, that development. The second verse comes in a little bit, you know, with more intensity. I don't like the word, you know, speeding up. I like the word intensity. As it gets more intense, there might be subtle shifts in volume and tempo that are part of the development of a great song. Um, so I've always thought that about click tracks. It's something I've thought about. I'd like to do more recording. I'm recording something Monday. I'm going to be recording one song a month with some guys, and getting ready. And you know, I don't want to use a click track. It's an old blues song. Because I think it takes away from the intensity. You end up playing to a metronome. In classical music, I used to play, like I said, I used to play a lot of classical piano. No matter how good you are, playing to a metronome also, I think, affects your dynamics. Now there are, because it's hard to, it's the click itself doesn't have any dynamics. It's just a relentless click. I know some better click tracks might have accentuation, like a waltz click track or a 2/2 click track or something, but still there's not really any dynamics in the click track, so that can't help but affect your playing. I've seen some great drummers that can play with click tracks and sound amazing, but I still think when you have a really focus on a developed song with like a first verse and a second verse and maybe a solo and a third verse and you know, bringing it all home type chorus outro, a click track's going to kill that. Prove me wrong, but I just feel like that is, and I think it's that click tracks and drum machines or drum machines are a big part of the change in music. Um, you know, and they're convenient. They can sound really good, but one of the most important things in music is songs. In fact, I would argue the most important thing in music is songs, and even a good instrumental is a song. It might not have any words, but it's a song with a conception of what it is, and it's a song. And I think songs have development, and a click track just sort of inherently limits the development of a song. And sometimes I watch YouTube. YouTube is all like solos, you know, people, you know, demonstrating guitars. I love that. I do that too. You know, I'm not cutting that down. But you notice that I know there are songwriter sites, but a lot of the guitar channels, it's all soloing and instrumentals, and a lot of it's done to click tracks of some kind or backing tracks. And yeah, I do think it limits the development of a song and the arrangement of a song, because tempo gradations within control, but controlled tempo gradations, developments in intensity are as much a part of a song as dynamics, you know. There's nothing wrong with speeding up if it's what the song calls for, just like there's nothing wrong with playing the third verse louder than the second verse, or maybe bringing the third verse down a little bit, kind of get a little reflective, a little introspective, and then kick out a chorus. Those are called dynamics. And tempo, within a controlled tempo, very subtle, you know, but you cannot do that with the click track. It's not the same. I just wanted to share that with you. I hope you're doing well. I said I recorded that Robin Trower video last night. I listened to it today. I'm going to do it better, but I'll leave that one up. I hope I don't get a copyright claim. I'm going to have to go home and check if I have a copyright claim. If I do, I'm going to delete it. But there are a couple parts in there where I kind of emulated the recording, and that's what always gets you on those copyright claims. I don't think the basic chords of the song or anything would be a copyright claim, but if you play some of the licks or whatever that kind of evoke the recording, that's where they get you. So I'm going to do it again, though. Speaking of which, I listened to it, you know, this morning driving, and so I can do that better, you know. But you got to listen to it sometimes, start to let it gel. I just played that as a first take, almost just on purpose. Just put it on and played it, and Sometimes you get better, and that goes to click tracks too. I think a lot of times, even bands back in the day, they would play stuff in the studio, and they'd be so careful to get it right. And some of those studio albums, you hear classic songs, and the studio version would be kind of really tight, maybe well done, but the great versions would get a live feel. And by the way, really good studio bands like the Funk Brothers, Muscle Shoals, I think they had a knack for getting a lot. They played so much together. They made stuff sound. They gave stuff a live feel just automatically. That's what a really good band does. Because but they have to have a sense of the song. This is the first verse. This is the second verse, and every verse has a different characteristic. And if you just have a click track, and if you say, well, the second verse needs to be louder than the first verse, but all you're doing is turning up a slider, that's not building in intensity. It's not really just louder, it's more intense. And intensity is an analog gradation thing. It's not just a digital fader on a mixing board that turns up a little bit. Thank you. God bless you.